All right, so we're back, and today's video is a simple yet complicated question that we have to answer because we're about 3 weeks out from the Misfits card, and obviously everyone remembers KSI, 2 opponents, his first event as a promoter and a fighter. Even if you're like me and the post-fight hype or withdrawals are a lot like my addiction to caffeine, in other words, it never goes away. We've had some time now to sit back and digest everything, like that first helping of Thanksgiving dinner before that second round comes, and let's be honest, we're all less prepared for a second round than Luis Pineda is. But you get my point. We've had some time, and now we can start to ask the question for KSI specifically, who is KSI fighting next? I feel like it's test day, and I just so happen to sit right next to the smartest kid in class because I think I have the answer. So the breakdown. Let's go. All right, first off, I want to make sure you guys know I'm not breaking any news for you guys. I'm simply giving you what I think is going to happen come January 14th, and that's where we start. KSI is going to be back on January 14th. That leaves us October, November, December, boom, January, about 4 months now. So he's going to have about 16 weeks here to get ready for what he says he wants, for his manager, Mams, to feed him a legitimate opponent. And listen, it's not like KSI hasn't said who he wants to fight or who he thinks are some names that would make sense for his next fight. He put it on Twitter: Tyron Woodley, Danis, Slim, and Dr. Mike. And I saw people rush to that tweet and say, what about Tommy Fury or Andrew Tate? And he addressed those two. One, this is a little bit of an Easter egg now confirmed. X Series number 4 is going to be in America. That rules out Tommy Fury, who is still having issues trying to get into the United States because of the Fury family name. John, Tyson, Tommy, I'm sure there's more in that family that are connected to crime lord Daniel Kinahan. And it looks like as long as that investigation goes on, Tommy's not stepping foot on U.S. soil. Now for Andrew Tate, KSI did say he wants a piece of that.
Andrew Tate! I want a piece of that!
But apparently, I don't know how they've known this or if they've contacted Andrew Tate. They said he's too heavy. I know that Andrew Tate fought around cruiserweight or 200 pounds when he was actually fighting. I'm sure he weighs a little more now, but I don't like that fight for KSI anyway. I don't think Andrew Tate is a guy that you just jump to after Swarms and Pineda. And I'm not even saying because of the controversy or anything like that. That's not something I even know about. What I'm talking about is strictly in the ring. I know people like to make fun of him being knocked out and looking at his pad sessions and being like, what the fuck is this? But remove your bias and go watch the film of Andrew Tate. That guy is experienced. His technique and style isn't just Western boxing based, but it's a blend of different martial arts into boxing. So that blend makes him even more dangerous. He's got good anticipation. He understands how to bait and set up shots, and he has hammers in his hands. That guy's a problem for all influencer boxers. I would say that's not a fight he should take right now. So with those two out of the way and KSI seemingly uninterested in those fights, we have the 4 that he said left. Let's go through them one by one. First up is Dr. Mike. Let's talk about the good things about Mike. One, he had a great showing in his Creator Clash main event with iDubbbz. I thought for the most part, when you watch that back, he was in control of that fight for the majority of it. Has a massive name. We're talking about a guy with 10 million subscribers on his YouTube channel, pulling tens of millions of views per month. He and Ian were big draws for Creator Clash. They sold over 100,000 pay-per-view buys, but it's hard to distinguish which one of the two of them were the bigger draw. And that's where I think the pitfall may start to come up for Dr. Mike, is that KSI loves to get in the head of his opponents. He loves to talk his shit. He loves to promote. And I don't know if Dr. Mike would promote any differently than maybe a guy like Alex Wasabi did. And what I mean by that is that Dr. Mike, leading up to the iDubbbz event, was never going to be anyone other than himself. He wasn't going to talk a bunch of shit. He wasn't going to say things that he didn't actually mean just to bring in more pay-per-views. He's going to be who he is, which is a pretty fucking nice guy, to be honest with you. Mike's a nice dude.
For those that expected this video for me to be talking smack about iDubbbz, not happening. I, in fact, very much respect iDubbbz.
Like, they knew that was gonna happen. They knew that I don't go back and forth. I don't do the beef. But they still asked me to be the main event.
And how much JJ's talking about getting to Jake, I don't know if the people look at that fight and say, that's the next step to get him there. And something else I'm forgetting, Dr. Mike's gonna be fighting sooner than you think. I can't say when, I can't say who. Excuse my ugly ass face, but I now can say when and who. Mike will be fighting Chris Avila, who is a stablemate of one Nate Diaz, on Jake's undercard on October 29th. You heard it here second because they announced it this morning. Whatever. Back to the video. So if that fight doesn't go well, or he has to sit out for a little bit after, that fight couldn't happen anyway. So for all those reasons I said, unfortunately, my guy Mike, it's probably not going to be him next. But someone that does have a legitimate shot is our next guy, and that is Slim. We all know that Slim's stock has gone through the roof because now people are starting to realize Slim is for real. So let's talk about why he would be a great fight for KSI. One, he's a legitimate threat to KSI because when he steps in a ring, he delivers. And when he got in front of a guy that people thought is legitimate and can possibly be a threat to KSI, myself included, on 2 weeks' notice, Slim knocked him out too. And this is what's risen his stock higher than the fucking NASDAQ, which is not saying much because everything is down. But you get my point. Slim is on another trajectory right now and has just as much, if not more, experience than KSI does. And probably the most important thing and why Slim would be a diamond in the rough here is because of that Brooklyn background, his ability to talk trash with the best of them in this scene. So looking at it, Slim does have the entire package, except one thing we have to address. This is very silly, but the clout level of Slim, because it will really have to be for KSI. What does this fight do for me in the future? I beat this person. How does that get me closer to Jake? How does that get me closer to that next level? It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. If he beats Slim, a lot of people are going to say he was supposed to. If he loses to Slim, well, he's never getting the Jake fight. And that's what I'm saying. It's not really a way that KSI gets a benefit out of fighting this fight other than a real legitimate challenge. Slim is already fighting Ryan Taylor on Misfits X Series number 2, and winning that fight may help him get even closer to KSI, although I think a lot of people expect Slim to win that fight. But Slim being as active as he is and fighting continuously will get him closer. I just don't think he's going to get that fight yet. More likely, I would see Slim fighting Gibb on that card, which then absolutely, should he beat Gibb, would lead to the opportunity of him getting KSI. But I still think there's a couple rungs on that ladder for Slim. Unfortunately, I don't think he gets that fight on January 14th either. Next, we have a name I did not think I would see until recently, but here we are, Tyron Woodley. It would have been insane for me to be saying this 2, 3, 4 years ago that Tyron Woodley would not only have fought Jake twice and lost, possibly would be fighting KSI as well. It's fucking insane. So let's start there. Yes, one of the big issues that people are going to see with Tyron Woodley and KSI is that KSI would be fighting a guy coming off 2 losses to Jake Paul. And yes, the last one didn't look great optically. Tyron Woodley literally got these knocked out of him, laying face down on the canvas with the Dude Wipe sponsorship on his ass for when he woke up and had to clean up, and that was a definitive statement from Jake. But still, that fight was competitive up until that point where neither guy was having a ton of success, and even in the first fight, it was a competitive fight as well. Jake won using his jab off the back foot, but it wasn't like he destroyed Tyron and beat him 8 rounds to 0. Like, it was a competitive fight that Jake had enough skill and experience to pull away in. But there's big risk involved with Tyron Woodley, and this is an absolutely competitive fight for JJ. Here's why. Let's not forget Tyron Woodley fought Jake the second time on 11 days notice while he was filming Cobra Kai, came into that fight after no camp, while Jake had 7 months of camp or something like that. For Tommy Fury, I understand, but still, Jake was in great shape and ready to fight. He was primed for that fight. Tyron Woodley was not. That fight was contested at what, 190, something like that? So both guys were probably around 200 on fight night. JJ would want to fight Tyron Woodley at 180, 185. That's closer to Tyron Woodley's old fight weight of 170, so by proxy, him having to lose that weight, him being in a full training camp, he would get a Tyron Woodley that's not only in better shape, but now more experienced, even with those 2 losses, in a boxing ring that even Jake had. This isn't necessarily my thoughts, but the general public will want him to do what Jake did. Go in and knock Tyron Woodley out, maybe even do it quicker. So it's, again, more pressure on KSI to look better than Jake did against a guy that Jake already beat twice. But if you're JJ's team, not necessarily him, because it seems like he wants to fight fucking anybody right now, I think his team and those people over there are going to look at the Tyron fight and say, our guy just came in off a 3-year layoff, didn't really have an opportunity to get his feet wet in those 2 fights that he had because Swarms wasn't great, and Pineda, he just shouldn't have shown up. So again, thinking like KSI's team, maybe he needs one more fight before we pull the trigger on a big-time opponent like a Tyron Woodley. So I don't think that happens on January 14th. So that leaves one man, and that is Dillon Danis. And let's just look at this in career arc parallel, because it's inevitable that we're comparing what KSI does to what Jake does. Jake fought Ben Askren right after the Nate Robinson fight, right after he beat up a guy that really shouldn't have been in there with him, and Jake was clearly better than, something that KSI just did. And what did we end up finding out about Ben Askren? A guy that didn't have really any boxing skill and was a career grappler that relied on it almost to a detriment in his MMA career, which again brought him to the highest highs, but limited him at the top of the game because his striking was 0. Now, this is a bit of a stretch, but compare that to one Dillon Danis, a guy that hasn't fought in 3 years, a guy that is known specifically for being a high-level grappler, coming off a lower extremity surgery, a total ACL reconstruction, and a guy that, say what you will, finds a way to keep himself relevant in the combat sports scene, so much so that people are now calling for this fight. DAZN is posting Dillon Danis on their Twitter, on their Instagram. He is somehow, without fighting, as a fighter, remained relevant by having guys like Logan, Jake, and KSI continue to talk about him. And it's also someone that people want to see get beat up. Like all these names on this list, there's not a ton of guys that are like,
oh, I can't wait to see Dr. Mike get his ass kicked.
No one has that vitriol hatred like Dillon Danis does across the combat sports scene. So KSI could essentially be the guy that the entire community rallies around and says, please shut this guy up once and for all. So the challenge is, how good is Dillon as a boxer? We really don't know. There's been 3 years now that we've seen him do nothing, zero. And we look back 2 or 3 years ago, no, his striking wasn't great at all. He was getting pieced up by guys that were part-time MMA fighters, part-time car mechanics, and oil changers. But his grappling is high level, and that tells me that he can pick things up quickly. Now, sometimes grapplers don't transition to strikers very well, but that's the hard part. We haven't seen anything, so I don't know. But if we're playing the semantics game, and how does KSI do against the guy that Jake was associated with? If KSI goes out and smashes him, he can say, hey, look what I did to the guy you never fought. That part doesn't concern me as much, but it will to the general public. So, for that reason, I think, and I'm going to predict here, that either Tyron Woodley, long shot, but still could happen, or, and I think this is the best possibility for what we're going to see on January 14th, KSI will be fighting Dillon Danis. I think that fight makes the most sense. It's not a massive jump from Pineda to Tyron Woodley, or even higher, Pineda to Andrew Tate, but it's a nice builder for KSI to get back in there again against a more credible opponent than the 2 he already fought, which is what you want from him and anybody else. Continue to get more credible opponents as you move up, and puts him in a position then with a win to go after names like a Tyron Woodley or a Tommy Fury, because maybe they go back to the UK and they can do it there. Or if he's feeling really fucking frisky, going after a Nate Diaz or an Andrew Tate. That would set those fights up, but I just think he needs one more against a guy who has had the same sort of layoff that KSI did, and that people viscerally fucking hate. It already sells itself. Is that the fight to make? I don't know, but is it the fight they're going to make? I think it is. But that's just my opinion. You guys let me know down below. Who does KSI fight next? I don't have those answers, but January 14th here in the US, with the likes of Logan Paul, possibly Gibb, possibly Slim, possibly other massive names going to be on this card. It is going to be the biggest in influencer boxing history. So who is the guy that KSI, the main event of the card, fights? Don't have those answers, but guess we'll find out.